Hey, I'm a big fan of shooters, or shoot-'em-ups. Games with a fixed scrolling background where you just shoot up anything and everything that's in your way. And I really like it when developers think outside the box and apply new, interesting settings to these types of games, other than the typical starry space scene or distant planet that we're all used to. And that's what we'll be looking at today when Deephead Danny does non-space shooters. Legendary Wings is a vertical shooter for the NES by Capcom. You play as this angel guy with a gun flying around shooting things. You can shoot enemies in the air, as well as these little gunner stations on the ground. I've always really liked this mechanic in these types of games, as it adds an extra level of strategy. Rather than just mashing the fire button mindlessly blasting away, you're required to calculate your attacks to some degree, which I think leads to a more satisfying and rewarding experience. You can power up your gun a few times by getting these power cells. When you get hit, you will power down to the previous level of your gun. Naturally, if you get hit when you only have your stock pea shooter, you'll lose a life. You'll come right back if you have any extra lives, but if you lose all the lives, you'll have to use a continue and start the stage over, regardless of how far you got. This is really frustrating, especially in the later levels. When you come back against an onslaught of enemies with the strength of a malnourished toddler, it can be really hard to get your power back up, or even survive. The graphics are acceptable and the music is pretty good, but somewhat unmemorable other than the first stage. Sometimes when you destroy a gunner station, it'll open up a lucky area. Here the game switches to a side view where you can collect extra continues and also beef up your gun to its max strength. What? That's awesome. Full power transforms you into a badass phoenix, and you shoot these cool wave beams! This is the state you obviously want to try to stay in as much as possible, which can be difficult to even get if you're playing with somebody else. Oh yeah, there's a 2-player mode. At the end of each stage, you'll blow the head off of some statues and fight a dragon. This will grant you entrance into the Devil's Palace, where you'll go back to that side view and take down some funky brain ship at the end. Afterwards, it'll tell you how many palaces remain, so you always have a pretty good idea of how much the game is left. This game is challenging, and with fighting a variation of the same boss in each palace, it can become a little bit monotonous. But you could do a lot worse. It goes for around $9, and I give it a 3 out of 5. Thunderblade for the Master System is a shooter. You're in a helicopter, or maybe you are the helicopter. Whoa. Anyway, you have a normal shot that you can use to shoot the other helicopters, and a ground shot to shoot enemies on the ground. The game starts off as a vertical scrolling shooter, but halfway through the stage it switches to a third-person, pseudo-3D point of view. It's much harder to avoid the bullets from the tanks in this view. This one's a little tough because your helicopter is quite large, and it makes it very easy to get hit. That, and you don't exactly maneuver that well. You are in a helicopter after all. Or maybe you are the... Nope, did that joke already. In the third-person view, it's hard to tell where the tank's bullets are going to hit, and a lot of times I'll get taken down thinking there's no way it should have connected. Also, when you die, apparently the tanks think you just can't be dead enough. You might be wondering why I'm showing clips from the same stage over and over again. Well, that's because I can't get through the first stage. The graphics are drab and uses very few colors. The music... I don't know, I guess it's there. This game could be had for a $5 bill, though that money can be better spent on almost anything else. I give it a 1.5 out of 5. Also, screw this asshole. Popin Twin B is a vertical shooter by Konami that was only released in Japan on the Super Famicom. This is also known as a cute-em-up, and it's easy to see why. Everything is over-cutesified and super colorful. In fact, this might be one of the most colorful games I've ever played. Your ship can shoot air targets as well as throw projectiles at lower targets. Yes, your ship has arms. The most novel concept here, and the main thing that sets this shooter apart from the others, aside from the adorable charm of course, is the power-up system. The power-up items take the form of these bells. You get them from shooting at happy fluffy clouds. Oh, look at that face! You can juggle the bells by shooting them and they will change colors. Each color corresponds to its own power-up. The gray bell gives you this puffy shot, the green one gives you an option, pink is a shield, blue raises your speed, and purple is this wave spread shot. This is personally my preferred weapon. The bronze bells only give you points. Yay! But if you manage to grab a flashing one, it'll give you ammunition for your special attack. With this, you can let loose a swarm of options that will hit everything on the screen. Go, my tiny army! Sometimes you'll find a heart that will fill some of your life bar. Yes, you have life bar, which is really nice. You'd be surprised though how fast that can be depleted when stuff gets crazy. If you die, even if it's on the boss of the stage, you need to start the entire stage over. That's the trade-off. This difficulty is balanced though, and it makes for an enjoyable experience, but not too difficult where you want to rip your hair out or anything. There's a story here that involves some evil scientist guy that's doing bad things, I guess. I don't know, I can't read Japanese. The music is pretty decent in this one, and as I feel I've made it pretty obvious, the vibrant graphics are easily the game's highlight. This is a great game for one player or two. Currently, you can snag a copy for around $15 or so. If you have a way to play it, I'd strongly recommend it as somewhat of a hidden gem. This one earns a 4 out of 5. Dragon Spirit is a cool one, because dragon! Rah, rah, rah. This vertical shooter by Bandai was in the arcade and saw multiple home ports. I have the NES and TurboGrafx 16 versions, so those are going to be the ones I'm going to talk about here. The NES version, whose full title is Dragon Spirit: The New Legend, offers a story about a bad guy resurrecting a great evil and kidnapping the princess, who just happens to be your sister. Your dad, who's on his deathbed, gives you a sword that transforms you into a dragon, giving you the power to save her and destroy the evil that has beseeched the land. Despite being set in a time of at least semi-civilized society, there's dinosaurs and all sorts of weird monstrous things to fight. Like Legendary Wings and Popin Twin B, you can attack air enemies as well as baddies on the ground. Dragon eggs on the ground and flashing enemies will yield power-ups when destroyed. These range from increasing or changing your firepower, giving you 2 small dragons by your side, or even giving you heads.
I said heads, plural. Don't get it twisted.
You can upgrade your dragon to have up to 3 spitting heads. This is awesome! It is so satisfying destroying things as a dragon. The boss battles are fun and not too challenging once you figure out their patterns. The graphics are acceptable and the music is actually pretty good and fits the action really well. The TurboGrafx 16 version, despite lacking the subtitle and the seemingly tacked-on story of the NES port, seems like the same game from what I've played of it. I say from what I've played of it because this game is much harder than the NES one. The level design is about the same, at least the first 3 levels, but your dragon is larger, providing a much easier target for enemies to hit. Other than the difficulty, the graphics and music in this version are so much better than on the NES. It's really hard for me to choose between the easier one or the more polished one. Here's a side-by-side so you can see for yourself. I feel like despite the extra difficulty, I have to give the edge to the Turbo version, but only barely. Currently the NES version will cost you $6, and the TurboGrafx version is going for about $25, HuCard only. You can't go wrong with either of these. I give the NES version a 3 and the Turbo version 3.5 out of 5. Figliosaan on the Genesis is another vertical shooter. This time you're in a Greek mythology setting. Honestly, I love this, as I've always found these stories interesting, and what a neat spin to put on a shooter. As the story goes, the goddess Artemis was kidnapped while on a joyride on her Pegasus. As Artemis's brother, Apollo, you need to rescue her as you take flight into glorious battle of... Oh, hey baby, how's about you and I? Dude, that's your sister! Apollo is equipped with a magic sword that can shoot divine power, or something. You can charge his power by holding the attack button for a short time and releasing it. You'll find yourself using this quite often because it packs way more of a punch than just button mashing. You'll fight all sorts of cool stuff: griffin riders, giant serpents, skeletons, evil wizards, and more. The bosses are really neat too, featuring many characters that you'd expect from this mythology. You can get the typical power-ups from these gold birds like Speed Up and Option, but every once in a while they'll have a really cool sub-weapon that lasts for a limited time. These colorful lightning bursts work really well in tight corridors. This game is quite nice to look at in some sections, like the first level with these scrolling clouds as you fly high above the land, but then others are really basic, like in this dungeon. The music is pretty good, but somewhat unmemorable. You can sustain up to 3 hits before you die, and it can be really easy to get hit simply due to your size. One odd design choice is having roughly a quarter of the screen taken up with this status area. I mean, yeah, it's kinda cool, but this just makes the play area that much more limited, and it's hard to look over to check to see how much life you have left without getting hit because you aren't paying attention to the action. These complaints aside, I still really like this one. I think this is a case where the theme carries the somewhat average gameplay. Also, after each level, you fly over this portrait that will tell you the next part of the story before continuing on to the next stage. Overall, this is a fun gem that not many people seem to know about, and that I'd strongly recommend for anyone's Genesis collection. It can be yours for about $20. 3.5 out of 5.
Well, there you have some non-space shooters. If I didn't cover a game in particular, it might be because I don't own it, or it may be because I don't want to oversaturate the episode with games from all one system. But if there are some that you had in mind, let me know in the comments. Maybe I've never heard of them and I might want to check them out. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and tune in next time to see what D-Pad Danny does next.